You are freezing your food wrong. Not a little wrong, completely wrong. Right now, somewhere in your freezer, there is food dying a slow, sad, freezer-burned death because nobody ever taught you the right way to do this. Here is the truth. Your freezer is not a graveyard for leftovers. It is the single most powerful tool in your kitchen, and almost nobody uses it right. Number 20 puts your forgotten pancakes back into rotation in seconds flat. Number 5 takes one wet kitchen sponge and turns your freezer into a tiny bacteria-killing machine. By the end of this list, you will never look at that icebox the same way again. Hit subscribe now because these tricks save real money fast, and the best ones are still coming. Let us start at 25. Number 25. Freeze herbs in oil, not water. Stop letting fresh herbs die in your crisper drawer. Chop them up, pack them into an ice cube tray, cover them with olive oil, and freeze. That is it. Each cube becomes an instant flavor bomb for soups, pasta, and skillets, ready the second you need it. The oil keeps the herbs bright and fragrant instead of turning them into a sad frozen clump, the way water freezing always does. Pull a cube straight from the freezer into a hot pan and listen to it sizzle immediately, releasing every bit of flavor you locked in weeks ago. Practical home cooks who hate wasting a fresh bunch of basil or parsley need this trick more than almost anyone. Most people buy a bunch, use a third of it, and watch the rest turn to mush in a bag. This stops that completely. Number 24. Flash freeze before you bag it. Here is the mistake almost everyone makes. You dump berries, chopped vegetables, or meatballs straight into a bag and freeze the whole thing as one giant clump. Bad move. Spread items out flat on a tray first, freeze them for a couple hours, then transfer them into a bag once they are solid. Now everything stays separate, and you can grab exactly what you need instead of hacking at a frozen brick with a knife. Busy parents juggling school lunches and weeknight dinners need this trick the most, because grabbing a handful of pre-frozen chicken pieces beats wrestling a frozen block every single time. The texture stays cleaner too, less mushy once thawed, because nothing got crushed together while freezing. One extra step now saves you real frustration later. Number 23. Label with the date, not your memory. Your memory is not as good as you think it is. That mystery container in the back of your freezer could be from last month or last year, and you genuinely do not know. Grab a piece of tape, write the date the second something goes in, and stop playing freezer roulette every time you cook. This single habit alone prevents more wasted food than almost anything else on this list. Zero waste-minded viewers already know that most food thrown away was never actually spoiled, just forgotten and feared. A dated label removes the guesswork entirely and turns hesitation into confidence. Open the freezer, read the date, decide in 2 seconds. No more sniffing mystery bags, no more tossing something that was probably still fine. No more wasted money sitting frozen and forgotten. Number 22. Freeze milk in ice cube trays. Milk about to expire does not have to go down the drain. Pour it into an ice cube tray and freeze it solid. Each cube melts down into exactly the right amount for coffee, baking, or a quick sauce. No waste involved at all. Once frozen, pop the cubes into a bag, and they stack neatly instead of taking up a whole carton's worth of space. Practical home cooks who hate throwing out milk just because the date crept past will love this one. The texture changes slightly once thawed, a touch grainier, but for cooking and baking it makes zero difference. Most people see an expiring carton and panic, dumping it out before it even technically goes bad. This trick buys you weeks of extra time, turning a guaranteed loss into something you can actually use later without thinking twice about it. Number 21. Freeze bread before it turns. Bread goes stale faster than almost anything else in your kitchen, and most people just watch it happen. Slice the loaf before freezing, not after. So you can pull exactly 2 slices for toast without thawing the entire bag. The freezer actually slows staling down better than your counter or your refrigerator ever could, keeping that bread fresh for weeks instead of days. Cost-conscious shoppers who buy bread in bulk, because it is cheaper, need this trick the most, since bulk buying only saves money if the bread does not go to waste first. Pop frozen slices straight into the toaster, no thawing required, and they come out just as good as fresh. Most people buy one loaf at a time purely because they assume freezing ruins bread. It does the opposite, and bulk buying suddenly makes financial sense again. Number 20. Pancake stack. Freezing with wax paper. Leftover pancakes do not need to become a sad, stuck-together hockey puck in a bag. Stack them with a small square of wax paper between each one, then freeze the whole stack. Now you can pull exactly 2 pancakes at a time instead of fighting to separate a frozen brick with a butter knife at 7 in the morning. Toss them straight into the toaster from frozen, and they come out warm and ready in minutes. No microwave required. Busy parents running a chaotic breakfast rush need this trick more than anyone else on this entire list. Saturday morning pancake batches suddenly become 5 future breakfasts instead of 1. The wax paper costs nothing and takes 10 extra seconds. Yet it solves a problem nearly every household with kids has complained about at some point. Number 19. Freeze leftover wine in cubes for cooking. That half-empty bottle of wine sitting in your fridge for a week is not doing anyone any favors. Pour the leftover into an ice cube tray and freeze it. Each cube becomes an instant flavor boost for sauces, stews, and braises, ready the moment a recipe calls for a splash. No more opening a fresh bottle just to add 2 tablespoons to a pan sauce. Practical home cooks who actually cook from scratch regularly will use this constantly, since wine reduces beautifully straight from frozen without losing much character at all. Drop a cube into a hot pan and it melts down fast, deglazing everything in seconds. Most people either drink a flat bottle out of guilt or pour it down the drain entirely. This trick rescues every last drop and turns it into something useful instead of wasted. Here is the science behind almost everything on this list. Freezing does not kill bacteria, it simply pauses it, which is exactly why proper packaging and labeling actually matter. Cold chain guidance from food safety experts consistently points to one truth: food held at a steady freezing temperature stays safe far longer than most people assume, often months past when anyone would guess. The real danger was never the freezer itself. It was guessing, ignoring dates, and tossing food out of fear instead of knowledge. Number 18. Freeze soup, flat in a bag. Soup takes up an enormous amount of space if you freeze it standing upright in a container. Pour it into a freezer bag instead. Lay it flat on a tray until solid, then stack it like a book on a shelf. Frozen flat, soup thaws in half the time too, since there is far less thickness for the heat to fight through. Cost-conscious cooks who batch cook soup to save money need this trick badly, because freezer space disappears fast otherwise. A stack of flat soup bags takes up a fraction of the room a dozen round containers would. Run the bag under warm water for 30 seconds, and it slides right out into a pot. No fighting with a frozen block stuck to plastic. Most people never think to lay anything flat, and their freezer pays the price in chaos. Number 17. Double bag. Anything with a strong smell. Open your freezer and smell garlic, fish, and last week's curry, all fighting for dominance the second the door cracks open. That happens because one bag is not enough of a barrier against strong odors, and freezer smell transfer is shockingly real. Double bag anything pungent, squeeze out as much air as possible, and your vanilla ice cream stops tasting faintly like onions for no reason. Practical home cooks who freeze a lot of strong ingredients, garlic, fish, certain cheeses, need this trick the most. The difference is immediate and obvious the next time you open that freezer door. Most people blame their freezer itself for smelling off, when really it is one thin bag failing to do its job properly. 2 bags cost almost nothing extra and solve a problem people have quietly lived with for years without realizing there was an easy fix. Number 16. Freeze egg, whites and yolks separately. Got extra egg whites from a recipe that only needed yolks, or the reverse. Do not pour them down the drain in defeat. Freeze whites flat in a bag or in an ice cube tray, 1 cube per white, and they whip up almost exactly the same once thawed. Yolks need a tiny pinch of salt or sugar stirred in first to keep them from turning gluey in the freezer. A small step most people never learn until it is too late. Zero waste viewers who hate watching good protein go to waste will appreciate this one immediately. Label clearly which cubes are sweet and which are savory, since nobody wants a salty surprise in their morning omelet. Most people assume eggs simply cannot be frozen at all, and toss the extras without a second thought, wasting food that could easily survive for months. Number 15. Grate butter. Frozen for instant use. Forgot to soften your butter again. Stop microwaving it into a greasy puddle and ruining your recipe. Grate frozen butter straight on a cheese grater instead, and it softens to workable consistency in minutes just sitting on the counter. No melting involved. The shreds also blend into pie crust and biscuit dough far more evenly than a clumsy diced cube ever could. Practical home cooks who bake regularly will recognize this as the trick professional bakers have quietly used for years. The texture this creates in a flaky crust is genuinely noticeable, lighter and more even throughout. Most home bakers fight with rock-hard butter or accidentally melt it entirely, ruining the structure of whatever they are making. A grater solves both problems at once, and it takes less than a minute to do. Number 14. Freeze ginger whole, grate it frozen. Stop buying a piece of fresh ginger only to watch it shrivel into a sad, rubbery lump in your produce drawer within a week. Freeze the whole unpeeled knob instead. When a recipe calls for it, grate straight from frozen using a microplane. Skin and all, no peeling required at all. The frozen texture actually grates finer and faster than fresh ginger ever does, releasing flavor immediately into whatever you are cooking. Curious cooks experimenting with stir-fry, tea, or marinades will use this constantly once they try it once. The smell that hits you the second you grate it is sharp and bright, nothing like the dull, soft ginger that has been sitting too long. Most people buy more ginger than they need, use a small piece, and toss the rest weeks later. This trick makes a single piece last for months instead of days. Number 13. Vacuum out. Air with a straw trick. No vacuum sealer at home. No problem. Push a bag almost closed, leave a tiny gap, stick a straw through it, and suck the air out manually before sealing the rest shut. Air is the actual enemy here, not the cold itself, since trapped air causes the freezer burn that ruins texture and flavor over time. Zero waste-minded cooks who refuse to buy expensive equipment for something this simple will love how well this works. The bag shrinks down tight around the food, almost vacuum sealed, for the cost of nothing beyond a few seconds of effort. Most people seal bags loosely, trap pockets of air inside without realizing it, and wonder months later why everything tastes slightly off and freezer burned. This fixes that completely, using a tool already sitting in your kitchen drawer. Here is what should genuinely frustrate you. Americans throw away an enormous amount of food every single year, and a huge share of it sits frozen, forgotten, and untouched until it gets thrown out anyway. That is not a personal failure. Nobody ever sat you down and taught you how to actually use this appliance. Companies selling fresh groceries every week benefit when you overbuy and waste more. Maybe it is time the freezer finally got the respect it deserves. Before we keep going, tell me something in the comments. Which one of these tricks are you already doing? And which one just completely surprised you? Drop it below because we are nowhere near finished with this list. Number 12. Freeze. Leftover tomato paste in tablespoons. You buy a whole can of tomato paste, use 1 tablespoon, and the rest sits in the fridge growing a strange film until it gets tossed weeks later. Stop that cycle today. Scoop the leftover paste into tablespoon-sized dollops on a tray. Freeze them solid, then bag them up. Now you have exactly the right portion ready whenever a recipe needs a single spoonful. No waste and no guilt involved. Zero waste viewers who hate opening a can just to use a fraction of it will find this trick almost embarrassingly simple once they see it in action. Drop a frozen dollop straight into a simmering sauce and it melts in within a minute. No thawing required at all. Most people either choke down an entire jar of pasta sauce just to use the leftover paste, or they let it rot in a container nobody remembers opening. This solves both problems for the cost of 1 tray and a few extra minutes. Number 11. Freeze cookie dough balls, bake from frozen. Fresh cookies should not require a full baking session every single time the craving hits. Scoop dough into individual balls, freeze them on a tray, then transfer them into a bag once solid. From there, bake 2 or 12 straight from frozen anytime you want, adding only a couple extra minutes to the original bake time listed on the recipe. Busy parents managing chaotic afternoons know exactly how valuable this trick becomes the first time a child demands fresh cookies with zero notice. The dough holds its shape better frozen too, spreading less and baking up thicker than dough baked the same day it was made. Most people either bake an entire batch at once and overeat everything within 2 days, or skip baking altogether because the process feels like too much effort for one craving. This trick turns an entire baking session into single servings, ready whenever you actually want one. Number 10. Freeze citrus zest before the fruit goes bad. A lemon or orange about to turn soft in your fruit bowl still has valuable zest sitting right there on its skin, and almost nobody thinks to save it before tossing the fruit. Zest it first, spread the shavings on a small plate, freeze briefly, then transfer into a tiny container or bag. That zest stays bright and fragrant for months, ready to lift a sauce, a dessert, or a marinade the instant you need it. Practical home cooks who hate wasting the most flavorful part of a piece of fruit will use this constantly once they start. The smell. The moment you open that container later is sharp and citrusy, almost like zesting fresh fruit all over again. Most people toss citrus the second it starts to soften, never realizing the skin was the most valuable part the entire time, full of oil and flavor the actual fruit could never replace. Number 9. Use the freezer to reset a pie crust fast. Your pie dough turned warm and sticky while you were rolling it out, and now it refuses to hold any shape at all. Stop fighting it on the counter. Slide the whole thing onto a tray and into the freezer for 10 minutes flat. The butter firms back up almost instantly, and suddenly the dough behaves again, crimping cleanly and holding its edges without tearing apart in your hands. Curious bakers who struggle with pie crust more than any other recipe will recognize this as the missing step nobody ever explained clearly. Professional bakers reach for this trick constantly, since warm dough is the single biggest reason home pie crusts turn out tough and overworked instead of flaky. Most people just keep pushing through with warm, stubborn dough, wondering why their crust never looks quite right. 10 minutes of cold patience fixes a problem most people assume is a skill issue, when really it was always just a temperature issue the entire time. Number 8. Freeze coffee. In cubes for iced coffee. Iced coffee gets watered down and sad within minutes once regular ice cubes start melting straight into the glass. Brew extra coffee, pour it into an ice cube tray, and freeze it solid instead. Now your iced coffee stays strong and flavorful from the first sip to the very last drop, since the cubes melting only add more coffee, never plain water. Curious coffee drinkers who already make coffee at home anyway will wonder why nobody told them this sooner. The flavor stays sharp and bold, even after sitting out for half an hour on a hot afternoon, something regular ice can never manage. Most people either drink watered-down iced coffee and accept it as normal, or buy an overpriced version from a shop specifically to avoid that problem. This trick solves it at home for the price of coffee you were already making, using a tray that is probably already sitting in your freezer right now. Number 7. Freeze. Thanksgiving. Leftovers the right way. Thanksgiving leftovers deserve better than one sad container of mixed everything mashed together and forgotten in the back of the fridge. Portion turkey, stuffing, and gravy separately into flat bags, label each one clearly, and freeze them the same night while everything is still fresh. Done properly, that meal comes back to life months later in February, tasting nearly as good as the original table it came from. Family-focused viewers who cook a big holiday spread every single year need this trick more than anyone else on this entire list. Properly frozen turkey and gravy reheat with almost none of the dryness people assume is unavoidable after freezing. Most households either overeat leftovers for 4 straight days just to avoid waste, or toss perfectly good food once everyone gets sick of looking at it. Done right, that holiday meal can quietly resurface as a comforting dinner on a random Tuesday in the dead of winter. Professional kitchens never treat the freezer as a last resort. Chefs use it constantly, deliberately, as a working tool, not a place where food goes to be forgotten. Restaurants freeze sauces, stocks, and components ahead of time specifically because it saves labor and protects flavor far better than most home cooks assume. That single mindset shift, treating the freezer as active storage instead of a graveyard, is the real secret behind everything left on this list. The final entries are not just clever tricks anymore. They are proof that this appliance deserves a complete reputation overhaul. Number 6. Freeze casseroles. Before baking, not after. Assemble your casserole completely, cover it tightly, and freeze it raw before it ever sees an oven. Baking from frozen later actually produces a better texture than reheating something already cooked once, since the layers never overcook or dry out during that second round of heat. Family-focused cooks who batch prep meals for busy weeks ahead need this trick the most, since one prep session on a Sunday afternoon suddenly becomes 3 or 4 future dinners with zero extra effort involved. Add about half again the original bake time when cooking straight from frozen, and the result still comes out bubbling and golden on top exactly the way it should. Most people freeze leftovers after baking instead, and the texture genuinely suffers the second time around, often turning mushy or unevenly heated throughout. Freezing it raw from the very start changes everything about how that final meal actually turns out on the table. Number 5. The 2-spoon ice cream trick. Rock-hard ice cream straight from the freezer destroys spoons and patience in equal measure every single time. Skip the microwave entirely, since it melts the edges into soup long before the center ever softens evenly. Instead, run a metal spoon under hot water for a few seconds, dry it quickly, then use that warm spoon to scoop. The heat transfers directly into the ice cream on contact, carving smooth, perfect scoops almost instantly without melting the rest of the container. This trick works for absolutely everyone, regardless of age or cooking experience, which is exactly why it belongs this close to the top of the list. The texture comes out smooth and scoopable, never the sad, soupy mess a microwave always creates around the edges. Most people just attack frozen ice cream with brute force and a bent spoon, never realizing a few seconds of hot water solves the entire problem instantly and painlessly. Number 4. Freeze garlic and onion. Pre-chopped. Chopping garlic and onion fresh every single time you cook adds up to hours of repeated effort across a single month. Chop a large batch at once instead, spread it flat on a tray, freeze until solid, then bag it up for instant use anytime a recipe calls for either one. A frozen spoonful drops straight into a hot pan and softens within a minute, releasing nearly the same aroma as freshly chopped would have. Practical home cooks who cook from scratch most nights of the week will save real time using this trick constantly, especially on busy weeknights with little patience left for prep work. The texture changes slightly once thawed, a touch softer, but for cooked dishes, it makes almost no noticeable difference at all. Most people either buy expensive pre-chopped containers from the store or grind through the same tedious chopping process night after night, never realizing one batch session could cover an entire month of cooking. Number 3. Freeze a wet sponge to kill bacteria. Your kitchen sponge is quietly one of the dirtiest objects in your entire home, harboring bacteria that multiply fast in a warm, damp environment sitting by the sink. Wring it out, seal it in a small bag, and toss it into the freezer overnight. The cold does not just pause bacteria growth here, it actually knocks down bacterial counts significantly, since freezing disrupts the cell structure of many common bacteria strains over time. Zero waste-minded viewers who hate replacing sponges constantly will appreciate how this single step extends a sponge's useful life without spending another dollar at the store. Pull it out in the morning, let it thaw for a few minutes, and it works exactly like it did the day you bought it, just noticeably cleaner underneath. Most people just keep using a sponge for weeks straight, never realizing the smell creeping into their kitchen was a direct warning sign the entire time. Easily solved with one freezer cycle a week. Number 2. Freeze extra pie or cake slices. Right away, a whole pie or cake left sitting on the counter rarely survives more than a couple of days before it turns stale, dry, or simply gets eaten out of guilt rather than genuine craving. Slice it the same day you bake it, wrap each piece individually, and freeze whatever you will not finish within the next day or two. A single slice thaws on the counter in under an hour, tasting nearly as fresh as the moment it came out of the oven originally. Family-focused bakers who love baking but hate watching half a cake go stale and forgotten will use this constantly once they try it. The texture holds up remarkably well, especially for denser cakes and fruit-based pies that freeze better than almost anyone expects going in. Most people either force-feed a household the same dessert for 5 straight days or let the back half quietly go to waste sitting under foil on the counter, unnoticed and uneaten. Number 1. Treat your freezer like a pantry, not a graveyard. This is where everything on this list has been heading the entire time. Your freezer was never meant to be the place food goes to be forgotten, buried under frost until it gets thrown away in shame months later. It was always meant to be an active extension of your pantry, just as useful and just as visible as the shelf above your stove. Every single trick before this one stretched food further, saved you money, or rescued something that would have otherwise gone to waste without a second thought. This final entry asks for a complete mindset shift instead of another individual trick. Open that freezer door regularly. Know what is actually inside it. Use it the same way you use every other storage space in your kitchen, with intention instead of dread. Once you start treating it like a tool instead of a tomb, you will genuinely wonder how you ever managed without using it properly before today. Pick 3 from this list and try them this week. Start with number 24, number 11, and number 1, because together they cover the easiest win, the most satisfying trick, and the mindset shift that ties this entire list together. I tried the frozen sponge trick myself before writing this, fully expecting nothing, and my kitchen genuinely smelled cleaner within a single day. Tell me below which trick on this list you had never heard of before today, by number, not just in general. Your freezer was never the problem. Nobody ever actually taught you how to use it right, and now you finally know exactly how.